Welcome everybody to a very wet Thursday for our 6th public lecture of this new academic year. As many of you know, we hold these talks every week Thursday at 5 o'clock and offer, as you see, a very large space so that we can get the full impact of our talks and our interactions with our speaker while being still safely distanced from one another. We also broadcast these talks live through Zoom and also through YouTube Live. All of these talks will be available on our website in a couple days if you want to check it out again. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional territory the university stands, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanish peoples whose historical relationship with the land continue to this day. Our speaker this afternoon is Dr. Dan Russek, whose work has always really intrigued me, so I'm quite looking forward to hearing what he has to say about it. Dr. Russek is Associate Professor in the Hispanic and Italian Studies program at UVic. He completed a PhD in Comparative Literature at the University of Chicago, specializing in modern and contemporary Latin American literature and visual arts. He teaches and conducts research on the links between literature and the visual arts and media, urban studies, and aesthetics. In 2015, he published Textual Exposures, Photography in 20th Century Spanish-American Narrative Fiction with the University of Calgary Press. In addition to publishing scholarly work, Dan also produces poetic prose, essays, and commentaries on photography. His 2020 book, Exercises in Urban Mysticism, was published with a much lovelier Spanish title through Mexico's Vanilla Artigas publishers. His current research explores the relationship between modern technology, culture, and literature with a focus on the rich and complicated notion of epiphany and mystical experiences. Today's lecture is Secular Mysticism, Aesthetic Experience in the Epiphanies of the Everyday. Please join me in welcoming Dan Russek to the CSRS.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much for being here in this rainy afternoon, evening. Again, I want to thank Paul Ramadat and the Center for hosting this talk. Scott, who also was part of the organization, and Talian, whom I just met. I want to also thank the audience members, my friends. I want to especially thank Mary Louise Meadow, who suggested this venue for me to present this work. Thank you very much, and my students who are here, thank you. Well, let me begin by saying that, let me read the abstract. For instance, we can read it together, the abstract of my talk. What spaces and occasions for enchantment exist in a secular capitalist techno-scientific age? My talk will answer the question by exploring the possibility of a secular mysticism in the intersection of art and religion. The talk will draw from my recently published book, Ejercicios de Mística Urbana, Poesía Práctica, Exercises in Urban Mysticism, Practical Poetry, and it will highlight strategies of creative misreading and specific modes of contemplation that foster epiphanic moments. It will focus particularly on the ways the protean medium of photography opens up within the bounds of perception, the doors for otherworldly visions in the context of the everyday. So this work is not theoretical or historical. It's really a creative writing, but kind of inflected by many years of readings in philosophy and theory. I wonder if this is really not a reaction to those readings. Anyway, let's begin by, I'll have a bunch of slides, I think too many. So I'll stop where I need to stop. This is the cover of the book. Here it is in person. I could perhaps devote a whole talk letting you know about the history of the publication of the book. It was, I don't want to abuse this word, almost a miracle to publish a book during the pandemic in a country, Mexico, that's struggling economically, and especially in terms of culture and the arts and lack of support. So I would say I have to acknowledge the help of the University of Victoria. We have a fund to support this publication. So I was awarded a grant. So thanks to that, the book was published. And I was very pleased with the process. It's, I guess, never easy to publish a book like that. Anyway, what's the book about? In short, it's a miscellaneous collection of poetic prose, essays, short narrative pieces, poems, aphorisms, quotations. It's a hybrid, experimental, slightly unclassifiable book. In Spanish, there's this category called varia invención, that speaks to this miscellaneous character of the work, plus illustrated with photographs, my own. So you might ask, what else? What else is there? The general subject, the aesthetic experience understood as an epiphany or revelation and developed according to a minimalist and abstract key in the context of everyday urban life. It's a product of many years of secret labor. Sometimes the author might not be the best person to summarize a work that has been with what has been with the work for many, many years. So there are many layers and many histories and many developments. Something I'd like to say is that I thought this would be an important project. I guess all poets think, all writers think. And I thought it was so important that I had to keep it a secret, like a state secret. No one should know. And one day I realized if I keep doing that, no one will ever know about it, right? So one day I stopped and said, let's do something. Let's organize the material and write something. Here in academia, we have a category that I can like. It's called research creation. So it's a blend between scholarly research and creative writing. And one can request grants using that category. And I would characterize the book as falling into that category, the research creation, and allows for experiments or original searches. There's a tradition of the photo illustrated book. I will not get into that here, but of course the many examples. We have a book at the library. I guess I ordered the book called El Fotolibro Latinoamericano. So there's a whole array of writers, photographers, designers who have done something like that, illustrate their books in different ways. Many times, these are collaborative projects. You have a writer, you have a photographer, designer. One of them I would like to highlight. These are two books by Argentine writer Julio Cortázar, who published these books by the late 60s, a time of literary experiments. And these books are close to my heart. I remember when I first got a hold of them, I was barely 20 years old. I don't want to say I'm following the footsteps of these books, but they leave a trace. They're an example. Again, we have them in the library if you're interested. I don't want to get too much into the biographical background of the book, but I think it's important. Photography for me has been a kind of a long-standing hobby that has grown to be something more important. So it's more than a pastime, less than a profession. And again, that opens up an interesting space for exploration. And the book is an outcome of that situation. I could also acknowledge here, perhaps, the example of my family. My father was into photography, and my uncles were into photography, and we have a bunch of photographic albums. So that's not as trivial as it sounds, because that's the example you see growing up. And I ended up assembling my photographs using the same format as my parents. I'd like to say that, I remember in family meetings, family gatherings, my father and uncles discussing about the latest camera they bought and the pictures, etc. And as one grows, teenage years, etc., one becomes a bit sarcastic and says, well, the more expensive camera you get, the worse photographs you're taking. That's what I used to tell them. They didn't like my comments. But again, I'm kind of again following the footsteps of this family example. I ended up pursuing a PhD where I put kind of into action these interests. I studied comparative literature, and my field was Latin American literature and visual arts, in particular photography. And it was quite interesting to read about the history of photography and the nature of photography and the many sort of incarnations of the medium over the decades. It's a pretty young art or medium, but it has gone through many changes even today. I must say this should be an example for any graduate student who's around. It makes sense to know to choose a good topic when you begin your PhD, because that topic will accompany you for many years, be part of your life. So I remember kind of almost the day and the course of the professor when I decided this is what I want to do. Because I knew kind of in advance that photography and the visual arts and this university foster this kind of studies. That on the one hand, you can pursue an academic career studying the history and theory of photography, but also you have this more creative aspect of it that sometimes has nothing to do with the theory. Okay, so here's the cover of my scholarly book. What I did was to explore how Latin American writers, a few of them, so they're quite important, wrote about photography and how they incorporated the photographic motif and photographs and photographers. So that was an expansion of my dissertation. Okay, let's go now to the reason I'm here. So my book is called Exercises in Urban Mysticism. If my book was called Exercises in Urban Economics or Urban Design or Urban Diplomacy, I would not be here. The crux here is what I do with this concept, mysticism. And let me read you the first paragraph. I translated it, so it's not vetted, corrected. You find a problem with the translation. I'm the one to blame. But I want to highlight two sentences. So the book begins like this: illustrated journal, long prose poem, narrative essay, catalog of forms and textures, avant-garde manifesto, yes, still, a diatribe against religions, a prayer that an atheist addresses to the divine, etc. So we begin with a paradox, and that's a paradox I'll sustain pretty much from beginning to end. I like particularly this idea of a prayer that an atheist addresses to the divine. That's a bit of a provocation. A bit later in the introduction, I write the following. In my youth, was a dangerous time, I thought that each person should write their own gospel. But who could truly accomplish such a thing? Who, in this critical age, would remain unscathed from such an enterprise? Who would dare, given the limitations of their point of view, to announce to the world such good news? So what I'm trying to do here, let me tell you first, important. I studied philosophy in Mexico, National University. And when I was studying philosophy, I thought that each person should study philosophy. That's the key for human redemption. To become, everybody should become, critical thinker. Later I thought, well, impossible. That will never happen. My hero was Socrates. If you know the story, that even didn't end too well. Uh, in any case, I still like the idea of each person should write their own gospel, because what I'm trying to say here is to take this kind of bedrock of enlightened thought, or the enlightenment, which is think for yourself. And once you think for yourself, why don't you found a religion? Right? Like turning things around, because many philosophers of the Enlightenment were not too keen on religion, they attacked it. So I'm exploring this aspect. I'm personally, I don't follow any religion. I'm pretty critical in many aspects of religions. But then there's, say, attitude or emotion, religiosity, that even if you are opposed to established dogmatic religions, something you might find something that appeals to you. So in a sense, the book is an outgrowth of that emotion or feeling or attitude. Let me, okay. So the book is peppered with reference to religion. Sometimes a bit ironic, sarcastic. I'll go through some. The book is an homage to what is seen, what is felt. It's the praise. I take the resources of art and aesthetics and try to use them to convey this feeling, let's say, of reverence. So let what foot soldiers and critics on horseback call art, that object or commodity of refined dispositions, thrive. If mysticism can be equated to an aesthetic experience, aesthetics should not be understood as theory, but as practice, less speculation and more perception. And above all, as the joy of the encounter with matter in its pure existence. But of course, there is no pure matter. There is no matter without a will to form. Let the love for matter be accompanied by a transformational idea. Thus, this homage to what is seen, to the marvel of the world in its untarnished secular version. Now, a marvel of the world, this is a title by a Spanish priest in the 16th century, Fray Luis de Granada, called Maravilla del Mundo, marvel of the world. And it's all with apologetics. It's a way of praising God through the beautiful creation that he created. As for the title, I had a few qualms to use mysticism in the title. I thought I could very well use aesthetic, mystica, aesthetica urbana, or urban aesthetics. But I decided the mystic gives it another more interesting dimension. And I hope to convey some kind of antithesis or irony here, because either you have the urban or you have the mystic aspect of it, but not both. They don't go together too well. Okay. So what I try is this reinterpretation of religiosity. And I'm of course, the relation between the art and religion is pretty strong, contested. I'm particularly drawn to thinkers that are kind of skeptical, secular, who are not interested in a personal level in God or the divinity of religion, even this practicing religion, but who think about God or write about God. And I think plenty of examples, and I found them quite interesting, and I identify with them in many respects. I have a few examples. I'm quoting here a French poet and thinker called Paul Valéry, who wrote an interesting novel essay around a character invented called Monsieur Test, who embodies the powers of the mind to the highest degree. And one of he devoted like 35 years of his life to write about this character. And in one of these writings, he describes Monsieur Tess as a mystic without a god, which again, another paradox. And I find that appealing. Try to make sense of that. So, as I said, the many references to religion, some of them, most of them ironic. That's one of, I think, it's my favorite trope. And let's begin with the dedication. You know, we always dedicate books to our mother or wife. Or I decided to. This is the dedication of the book. Este libro está dedicado al milagro de ver. And in Spanish works interesting way. In English, one could render it as this book is dedicated to the miracle of seeing. But in Spanish, dedicado means both to dedicate something to someone, but also dedicar or dedicarse means to devote your efforts to something. Something with that verb. Este libro está dedicado al milagro de ver. So yeah, I like how that sounds. I'm a kind of relentless critic of the idea of mysticism in this book, and I was, while preparing the notes of this lecture, I kind of realized something about my method. I'm not sure I recommend the following. I propose an idea that sounds good, and the next steps are to relentlessly criticize the idea, and let's see what survives. So many passages are critique of mysticism, sometimes in a playful way. I mean, I will not read this passage. Mysticism, a bad word, don't use it. For example, in chapter 6, it's a critique of mysticism, its impossibility. So I devote some passages to prove that mysticism is impossible. But the next chapter, chapter 7, I kind of changed my mind, because if mysticism is impossible, I should stop there. So I toned down a bit my criticism. I say, well, for a critique of mysticism, it's difficulty. So there's a way forward. Something if I take a step aside and see the book from a neutral point of view, I could link it to some inquiries happening today in some circles, art historians, cultural critics, that explore the notion of enchantment. There's an interesting book, a collection of essays called The Re-Enchantment of the World, Secular Magic in a Rational Age, where the editors, Joshua Landy and Michael Saylor, kind of advocate for a re-enchantment of the world. And the context, to make a long story short, the famous sociologist Max Weber at the beginning of the 20th century thought that the modern world, this modern world that is technologized, in the grip of bureaucracy and capitalism and science, is a disenchanted world. As if in the past, we had a closer relation with nature, and perhaps gods, and we were not alienated from the environment. So the modern man, modern society lives in this disenchantment, the state of disenchantment. But what Landy and Saylor tried to show is that that's not exactly the case, and analyze this idea of enchantment in different ways. So it says my book is an effort to enchant the world anew. Okay. I mentioned these authors thinkers that are critical of religion, but resort to religious figures or religious subjects. They point to this kind of transcendent realm, sometimes in a vague or tentative or aspirational way. Not that they're fully into that, but they find the topic interesting. One example, in English literature, James Joyce, of course, and his idea of the epiphany in the everyday. And I mentioned here a few Latin American writers close to my field of inquiry, very different among themselves, but all of them touching the subject of religion to some degree. Rubén Darío is a very important poet who tried sometimes some kind of blend between the Christian world and Greek and Roman mythology. So very sui generis mysticism. Jorge Luis Borges, the great Argentine writer, was wonderful philosophical, theological fictions, and sometimes very pointed references to mysticism. Octavio Paz, Mexican poet, and others. Those are the writers. Then we have the visual arts critics like Susan Sontag, who wrote a famous book on photography, where she sees that modern photography is this effort of going beyond or behind appearances and finding a beauty in the ordinary. So that's a trend she identifies. And how many photographers use photography as a way of revealing this kind of secret realm that's, in a sense, in front of our eyes. Here are a few common places, and again, I would not claim I'm discovering anything. I'm just following this tradition. The act of defamiliarize, to find the extraordinary in the ordinary. The act of creative misperceiving. I'm paraphrasing here what Jorge Luis Borges does in his literature, just this creative misreading. Just take a corpus of literature or philosophy and read it in a different way. And most famously, in his case, take the works of philosophy or theology and not read them as sources of truth or ultimate truth, but as literature of the fantastic, as imaginative works. So I do more something similar, but applied to perception. And I'll show you a few examples here really soon. Okay. Photography, I just quoted Sontag, this idea of photography as a means to record discoveries that's increasingly available to anyone. It has been available for a while to millions of people, and even more so today, I guess. Now, what happens with this photography, in the case of some photographers, I would like to join that club, is that allows you, to quote Hans Ulrich Gumbrecht, allows you to get lost in focus intensity. I love this phrase, get lost in focus intensity. I don't practice yoga or mindfulness or all these practices. Maybe that's what people who practice that feel. I experience it when I walk with a camera in pretty much any city in the world. Just walk the streets with my camera and discover things. I truly get lost. That could be dangerous, of course. some circumstances. This idea of being concentrated in a task and forget about everything. I like this quote by Gustave Flaubert, the great French novelist. I'll try my French here. Pour qu'une chose soit intéressante, il suffit de la regarder longtemps. This idea of concentration leads you to happiness. Okay. So we're getting close to the photographs here. So I ask a bit, again, tongue in cheek, ironically, a spiritual photography? I would say no. Let's not confuse spiritual photography with spirit photography, if you know about that. In the late 19th century, people were taking pictures of ghosts and apparitions. We're not talking about that, of course. It's more about understanding photography as a way of evoking or suggesting some kind of state or setting, rather than showing or depicting. Of course, photographers and the theorists of photography have noticed how photography is anchored in realism. Like we take pictures of things that are out there. The light impacts some photosensitive material and they reproduce a picture. So that's kind of the basic, or the essence of photography. That's pretty close to it. Photography is used to document things that are out there. We use it for all kinds of stuff to prove things. But then other photographers have used the medium in a more abstract way, a way of exploring patterns of textures where we really don't know what's being depicted. And in a sense, they're representations of alternative realities. Something I like this idea, I practice it a lot, and I use the phrase, page 14, photographs as windows into the enigma. The enigma in the sense of we don't know what's being pictured, and perhaps the enigma in the sense of something more transcendent is evoked or suggested. Of course, some people have tried it before. Some photographers realize that photography is not, even though again it's anchored in realism, can be used to produce all the kinds of images. And this is one of the most famous representatives of that trend, Manhole Covers, a photographer and editor. And we can stop and look at this photograph for a while and still don't know what's happening. And in a sense, feel enchanted by what we see. Again, windows into the enigma. Let me show you now a few photographs of mine. Most of them I included in the book. So here's on the left, a picture by a contemporary photographer, Marco Breuer from Germany. On the right, one of my photographs. They look alike, right? You can see some of the resemblances, but they're very different. I should say that when I took mine, I didn't know his. So I felt kind of vindicated. This one, for instance, it's not a regular photography, a standard photography. There's no camera, there's no object photographed. It's an intervention in the photographic paper. That's also one of the possible techniques. Mine is more like conventional. There's an object behind it. And this is where the window into the enigma ends, because I would tell you what's this photograph about. Sometimes I like to tease my friends and ask them, what do you think that is? I don't know if anyone wants to try. No, could be, but no, it's not. Sorry?
So is it a bowl?
Bowl? Yeah, could be. Why not? It's not, but I like you. I like this picture so much that I decided to use in the cover of my book. And here's let me reveal the secret. So what you're looking at, and by the way, Sontag talks a lot about this strategy of modern photography, the extreme close-up that makes the concrete abstract. So what you see over there, and I think over there, oh, it's overwhelming. What you see there is a bit of, it's like a seat. It's a seat. That's standing on the patio of a museum in Los Angeles. And when I saw this object, I thought, well, that's for me. That's for me to explore. So you see the people sitting there. It's not the best seat, the most comfortable, but it's there. And I love museums because of that, because many things happen inside and outside the walls. Then I went to the museum store and I saw they were selling this seat there in the museum store. Now, I don't want to suggest anything here, but Christmas is approaching, Hanukkah as well. And this will be such a wonderful gift to, presenters of the series of, I don't know. It's not cheap, $700, because of course it's a designer. Anyway, I take these works of art and I do my own art all the time. Okay, let's see some of the chapters of the book and some of the premises behind it. Again, I've been doing this for a while. The chapter 3, it's called Museum of Walls. And the idea here is that walls can be considered as interesting as the paintings that hang on them in museums and galleries. What's the Museum of Walls? It's the city, right? I mean, on the one hand, we have a wall with abstract geometry. And I should say, most of these pictures, I remember exactly where it was taken, what year, or the circumstance. They're very attached to me in that sense. And that picture over there could be, I don't know, could be what? A painting of what? Yeah. It could be the detail of a painting by Jackson Pollock, abstract expressionism. And not only could be, but is. But so what I find fascinating is this link between this abstract painting and what you see, or what you could see in any construction site anywhere in the world. So in a sense, Jackson Pollock teaches me how to see things out there. And I devote a paragraph, a passage here saying all these masons and people who deal with construction, every day they paint their Jackson Pollock without knowing it. And most probably, well, they don't know, they don't care. I care. I have anyway a gallery of pictures of walls, with shapes and forms and lines. And rhythm. Chapter 9, another chapter close to my heart, on bike racks. The title in Spanish is De las perchas para bicicletas consideradas como obras de arte. Bike racks considered as works of art. So I write about, so there's a mistake there, these metal structures, seen and photographed as public sculptures. So I take this utilitarian object that's out there to park bicycles, and I read it or see it or photograph it as if it was it's public art. I mean, the biographical background here is that I was in Chicago studying, coming from Mexico City. In Mexico City, there was not I don't think there's still today a bicycle culture. People don't ride their bicycles. People don't leave their bicycles in the streets. So I was fascinated with these objects. I've been amassing a collection of them. Okay. This is not part of the chapter, but another example of what I do. Manhole covers. I don't know if anyone is interested in them. The geometric patterns of manhole covers. I was quite surprised to learn that MIT Press, no less, published a book called Manhole Covers. On the right, you have see the cover. On the left, my picture. Anyway, don't tell me it doesn't say something. When I posted this on Facebook, and I thought this is a good blend between flower power and heavy metal. Okay, and now let's see some pictures. I finished the book with this one. It was quite an interesting thing to organize the photographs and to decide which ones belong where. It's a work of designers, of curators, and it's quite an interesting thing. Yeah, I was very pleased with the process. So here we have a photograph. I read this. This could be part of a, I don't know, catalog of buildings in some American city, but I'd like to see it as what? Any? Yes. It's just a building, right? It's at the end of Grant Park in Chicago, Michigan Avenue. I'm not sure what totems are for, but this would be my totem. I would choose this as my totem. Okay, I will leave it at that. I mean, it speaks about the aspiration to the infinite. This one, I've used it many times. I particularly like this one, in part because this looks like a manipulated photograph, like there's some post-production or there's a Photoshop there. And in general, I don't do anything with that, like only some cropping and this and that, but no manipulation as such. The idea is, this is what photographers call, this is very much outdated, straight photography, what was happening in the 20s, 30s, 50s. Some photographers even theorize that that's what photography, art photography should be, straight, no manipulation of any sort. The idea is that if you stand beside me, when I take a picture like this is what you would see. Speaking about windows into the enigma, any guess? Okay, no, Marlon. So what you're seeing is the reflection of a building in the back of a car. So the red is the trunk, and that's the reflection on the glass on the back, the same building, and just cropping and extreme close up. I was living in front of this building in Chicago, so it was my neighbor. And I can speak about windows into the enigma, many windows there, right? This is more, simplicity. Just a Venetian blind. I have a chapter called, what's called in Spanish was Yeah, diagonals, Sunday digression in praise of diagonals. This one, if I'm a bit pretentious, a bit more pretentious, I'd like to read it as and you can see the pattern, right? Series, sequences, repetitions. But this one, I endow some theological meaning here. This is the emanations of the divine, spreading to the universe. What you're seeing is just a kind of plastic chair, seen from really up close. Again, the same principle. And we could go on and on and on. Let me finish with this one. Yeah, I'll finish with this one. Because again, it follows the same procedure, right? It's capture sequences that evoke the infinite. But what I like about this one, this is not included in the book because I took it last year in Gold River. Gold River? Gold River? Yes, everybody? Gold River? Strathcona Park? So there's not much in Gold River, and that's okay. I was walking Gold River, and it's pretty easy to cover all of Gold River pretty soon. I ended up in the high school, and it was a very clear, beautiful day, and I saw the corrugated metal of the walls. I said, well, I'd stay here for a while to take some pictures, and I was very happy. Okay, there's more. I think I'll finish with this one, just to change gears a bit. The idea of the circle, there's a chapter called Circles Without End. And of course, we can find circles anywhere. And my goal as a photographer is to show the reader, the viewer, all of the circles that surround us. I like this one in particular. I guess I don't have to tell you what it is. Do I? Tom? So, No? Inner tube of the bicycle? No? Sorry, Marley. I think you're just stuck in the bike racks. Any? Should be easy. Yeah, hairband. I find so many in the parking lots of this university. And anyway, I have my collection of circles. So I'll wrap up here just to show you what I was trying to do, what I was trying to show as well. This experience of finding, as you can see as well, analogy is an important strategy for me, finding similar patterns in different settings, etc. Okay, yeah, I'll stop here. If there are any questions and comments. Oh, okay.
Subject and something man-made or woman-made. Does it make any difference?
Yeah, not many pictures of nature. I have an ongoing debate with my mother, who wants me to send her pictures of the garden or the forest. and I always say yes, but I don't do it. Yes, here's, I guess, where the idea of urbano, the urban, the city, comes into play. This is not about the expression of nature, though the connection would be a patterns in nature, which is a fascinating topic for sure. But my photography, what I look after, it's not that. Yeah, I'm fascinating with industry. It might not be very politically correct to say it, right, in these ecologically minded times. But this is the environment that we live in, right? And we cannot escape it, and will not escape it. So it's not that I think I don't endow value to that, but I explore something else. Yeah, human forms for sure.
I'm trying to figure out the formula this way. I would talk about it once a walk with the people of city blocks and one child. The idea was that we would perceive this picture. So I was thinking about photography and use the word mysticism and how these kind of relate to one another. I'm seeing a lot of relationship of shapes. And I'm wondering if as you're perceiving it as photograph. The question that I'm trying to articulate here is like, how does that maybe relate to your experience of reality? You know, so more than just an aesthetic experience, but then this experience ultimate reality.
Yeah. So the question was, how do I relate the experience of taking photographs that perhaps my background in philosophy and my references to mysticism, how that comes together?
And yeah, how is it that you perceive?
How do I
demonstrate here in relation to?
So how do I perceive?
How do you perceive what you're presenting to us? Raw photography, presenting us this image, which is a two-dimensional image, you know, but there's something mystical about it. One thing about this question, I appreciate that in some sense, what I told this question, these and the very
Yeah, I mean. Yeah. Okay. I mean, one way to find the link, I guess, is on the one hand, from the point of view of the producer or the photographer, to tell you there's nothing superior to the experience of capturing these images, of exploring the world, walking the streets, and getting lost in this focused attention. So the aspiration would be that what I produce will communicate something of that experience. And of course, it's a bit of a naive expectation. This idea of, I don't know if you experience it, but for me, it's important from a personal point of view, but also as a professor or as someone who's interested in these topics, right? The idea of the education of the senses, let's put it that way. That you read and you listen to music and you watch movies, but you don't remain the same. there's some transformation, some inner transformation. As professors at all levels, I guess, we expect to effect a positive transformation, to teach our students something that will affect their life in a positive way. They will see things differently. So I would say I'm involved in that process constantly. It's not that I publish a book and that's it. The book was just, one stage in this process of constant discovery. I feel I'm not answering your question. The idea of, the epiphany of the revelation, in a sense, they're figures of speech, as a way of saying, I don't find anything better than this, right? And I've experienced, and I have devoted my life to be exposed to the arts. That's something I would recommend to anyone. And the better works of art, the novels, etc. Well, that's what I would like to share. That's what I want to show. I am thinking of examples of music, for example. It's always hard to, I think, talk about the arts because we come from different places, different experiences, different sensibilities. I will try here. I remember I was studying PhD literature, and busy with your academic stuff. But I was listening in my boombox. Remember the boomboxes? I don't know if the tape recorder. I was listening to music by Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. I was listening there lost in this focused attention, and I thought, I will never find something superior to this. I mean, to this moment. And that's the kind of, I don't want to overuse the word mystical. It's not. It's again, the perfect awareness of the moment, right? And then you continue exploring that. Let me just finish my comment with what I do with music, because the book began with this dedication to the miracle of seeing. But the last passage, or the last 2 pages, appeal to music, as if the miracle is really somewhere else. And what I try to show there is the following, is something, and I think this might be a common experience, that you listen to a piece of music when you're 20, 25, and you kind of listen to the same piece 15, 20, 25 years later, but somehow you listen to something different or something deeper. And the key here is deeper. Something happened in your brain that allows you to perceive it, I would say, in a better way, less superficial, less shallow. That difference between the old and the new kind of opens the space that, I mean, I don't want to call it mystic, but the depth into these things. I'm sure I'm terribly clear here. It's very difficult to speak about music. That's very kind of personal and abstract. But that's my take. That is, if I could extrapolate to extrapolate that experience, like listening to music in depth to everything, my life would be, I would perceive things in a more, aware way, awake. Anyway, yeah. Okay. So anyway, I was trying to convey again this experience, this change, transformation the way you perceive things. And there's, I become a bit of an optimist. I was not an optimist, and now I am, because there's space for positive change. That's, yeah, that's it. Well, I would say, the optimism is kind of the outcome of many factors, and one has to recognize that one has been as privileged in many respects, right? And many people will help you, and you've done your homework, and you've been rewarded, this, that. I mean, it's not about personal merit necessarily. It's just the circumstances coalesce. And I would say, the moments epiphany happen all the time, and music is it's a perfect example, and a very difficult to convey, in a sense. I don't know, this is like a plea. I mean, it's as if the Faculty of Fine Arts and the Department of Music paid me to ask you to support music education. But that's what I believe, truly. I think my students here, you haven't experienced this, but a year ago when we were online, I taught a course, what was Latin American culture, something. I decided to begin each course with a song from Latin America, some musical piece. And I felt that was the best part of the course. And I hope the students got something out of that, which is a bonus, which is just a way of introducing. Anyway, I'm talking about music, but the same could be applied perhaps to visual arts, cinema, or other arts, and poetry, of course. Okay, Lina. Yeah. Yes. So Lina asks what a secular divine would be. I'm using the word mysticism, aesthetics. Well, I mean, secular divine, it's a bit of a contradiction in terms. Either you're secular or you attach to some kind of belief, divinity. Mostly we live, I mean, at least in the West, Canada, in secular environment, right? I mean, the government, daily life, at least BC, religion has not a lot of power to tell people how to live. Of course, this is quite different in other parts of the world. My take would be, yeah, let's keep the secularism, let's keep science and free thought and study philosophy and criticism alive and well. That's what we need. But at the same time, let's not discard, as perhaps happened in the 19th century with positivism, other philosophies, let's not discard religion. Let's not discard what religions can teach us. Yeah, that would be, beginning of an answer. I don't know if I answered. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if mysticism is this
yeah. Well, yeah, Lina said that I said the mysticism is a conversation with divinity. I don't remember having said that exactly. I said recently, I said mysticism is the highest point for religion and usually entails the union or the fusion of the self or the soul with something bigger than totality. Part of the problem is if you don't believe in the soul and you don't believe in a divinity, then where's that fusion? What does that mean, right? Of course, I would plead ignorance. I don't know. I don't know what happens afterwards. No one knows. What I like about this field of aesthetic experience is that you don't need to convince anyone in theoretical or rational terms, right? This is not necessarily conversation at that level. It's about showing what you found, and affecting people in a more sensory way, right? That's what the aesthetic experience allows us to do. Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thanks very much for joining us today, everybody.
No.
Just a little note that on Tuesday, so see you for that. And then on Thursday, so next week is kind of a full week. Next Thursday, we have a Zoom base from one of our fellows. Anyway, thanks very much for joining. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you again. And if there's any question or anything, please get in touch afterwards. Thank you, Paul.